Hi there, Carrie here. I am a community strategist and author of the book Building Brand Communities, which you can see in the corner over there. There it is. Today, I'll be talking about the top 6 myths or misunderstandings that I hear people talking about with regard to online communities on a daily basis. These are things that drive me a little crazy. And if you are a professional community builder, they might drive you a little crazy too. So I'm going to be walking through these 6 myths and misunderstandings and then sharing a little bit of context around each one and what the flipped side of that myth is, what the truth is. So my hope is that this video gives you clarity so that when people say these things about community that you know aren't true in your heart and soul and in your brain, that you then have things to respond to them with, to counter them with, okay? So number one, you need to be an extrovert to build community successfully. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, 90%, I would say a good 90% of the community builders I know do not identify as extroverts. They might be ambiverts, which means that they might present as extroverted but really be introverted, but they are typically not extroverted. This doesn't mean extroverts can't build incredible communities, but people who are introverted tend to be especially great at stepping back, listening, being really thoughtful and purposeful in their work before rushing forward into standing on the stage, being the loudest voice in the room. You need all kinds of people to build a successful community. So saying that a community builder should be one way or another, should have one personality trait or another, that's black and white thinking. It's not helpful. It's not true. Okay? That's number one. Number two is that people believe that social media and community are the same things. So this is something I hear all the time. People think that all of Facebook is a community, or they think, one of my favorites, that all of Tinder is a community or Hinge is a community. No. All of Tinder is a user base. All of Facebook is a gigantic, huge, multiple billion person long list of emails. That's what it is. Most people on Facebook don't know each other. Of course, you get into social networks and this idea of people being connected across many different channels and being able to actually meet each other, yada, yada, yada. But the core piece that is missing in these social networks is a sense of mutual care for one another. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't pockets of communities within these networks. There could be pockets of communities within Facebook. A lot of Facebook groups are examples of these pockets, but all of Facebook is not a community. Now, this could just be a semantic debate, but to me, it's actually critical. It's the critical piece to unlocking why we have such a culture of isolation and high expectations of one another, but yet we feel more lonely and disconnected than ever before. And it's because we come to expect our social media to fulfill the role of communities in our lives, and that's simply not the case. Community requires commitment, getting through conflict together, doing all kinds of things that are more than just posting about your day or liking and responding to other people's posts. So it requires an additional investment that is often missing in our social media-based relationships. There's some crossover. We could go into this from a whole social scientific background. We don't need to do that. Just know that they are not one and the same. Number 3, people believe that engagement or moderation in a community, which have to be specifically defined for your context. They believe that they just happen by magic. They believe that community success is synonymous with growth, that people will become naturally engaged as the community grows, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, what I see in communities is when they grow unchecked for a long period of time and they allow certain members to dominate the conversation, to set the agenda and the tone without proper moderation, without thinking about what engagement really deeply means to be meaningful in this particular community, what happens is you create something that is not sustainable in the long term. So these things don't happen by magic. Leadership is the linchpin in creating a community that is more than just a space for people to post things and respond to them. So proper leadership in a community is what can create things from participation, making things that are just activity related, to creating actual engagement that is meaningful and purposeful in a community. So if you are a community builder, you are most likely that leader, and I salute you. Number 4, people begin with the platform first. So people will think, oh, I have a Slack now, I have a Slack team. Now I can start to create my strategy. Or, oh, I'm going to start a mighty network, and then I'll create the strategy. No. Okay? We always start with purpose. Purpose, then platform. If we start with our purpose, our clearly defined reason for why it is that we're gathering together over an extended period of time, then the selection of platform can be informed by that purpose, as well as all of the content strategy you might have, all of the programming you might create. It all has to bubble up from purpose, not from the limitations that a platform might put on you. And why this is so important is that people often come at building community from a platform perspective, and they feel completely hemmed in, and they also feel not creative. So creativity doesn't come from the kinds of constraints that platforms put on you. It comes from the constraints of what is your purpose. So if your purpose is really clear and set, then everything that's not part of that purpose, that can go away. And you can holistically, completely focus on fulfilling that purpose, no matter what kinds of platform you might have, what kinds of events you might host, etc., etc. So that is number 4. Purpose first, then platform. Number 5, hashtag number 5, people believe that there are set metrics or set benchmarks that all communities have to aspire to. They believe that there might be, in fact, some way for us to say a community at 3 months should look like this, a community at 6 months should look like this, a community at 9 months, 18 months, etc., etc., etc. This is not true. There are, however, some rules of thumb that are extremely helpful in community building. One is the 80-20 rule, which is this idea that 20% of our efforts produce 80% of our results. This is true in communities, that the 20%, the core of your membership, is going to produce 80% of the value for your community. And then it goes even further than that, that 20% of that 20%, so 4% of your members are going to contribute just an outsized chunk of value for everyone else. And that is why focusing your resources on those core 4% of your members is so critical. It has ripple effects outward. So that is the only rule of thumb that we really have here. There's also a related idea called 99-1. I won't talk about that right now. But in terms of what you should be measuring and what those measurements should look like over time, you have to customize those and set benchmarks for those on your own, and they have to make sense for your organization and for your community. Okay? So no one's going to be able to give you a magic dashboard. I hate that that's the case. I really do, because I wish I could just give you a magic dashboard. I would. I totally would. But it's just not possible. And finally, the sixth myth is that people believe that saying the word community makes one appear, and that you can just volunteer people that they're part of a community. So that means you might send out letters to people in the mail. This is a real thing that a client of mine did. Send out letters to people saying, you're now part of this community, even though people didn't opt in. And here are the 4 responsibilities that you have as a member of this community, yada, yada, yada. And no one had actually consented to being part of this community. What that created was a sense of being taken advantage of, a sense of resentment among members. And what the organization had hoped was that they would just, do the large kind of spaghetti against the wall, just try to go after as many people as possible approach, and that they would just pick out the people who are responsive from that. But what it really did was it made the people who were most committed upset because they weren't asked and they were confused about what was going on. So just saying the word community does not make one appear. Instead, what you should do is start to craft a community alongside your potential members, especially those core members, core 10 to 15 members in your community. Start to craft what the community will be alongside them. Build it out from there. That way you don't ever have to volunteer people anything. You create something that people actually want to be a part of, so that you're not having to push so hard to create engagement or create participation or activity. These things can happen more organically. So this work, the work of building a community, is something that all human beings know how to do naturally. I truly believe that. I've seen it with my own eyes. People who feel like they might be socially awkward, that they have social anxiety, they can build community. And this is because it's part of our DNA to be social creatures. But what we need to do is get out of these dialogues and discourses around growth being the be-all, end-all, around technology being the thing that actually creates the community, and around competition and comparison between our work and others' work. So again, we have to ground into that purpose. And once we do that, it unlocks all kinds of other incredible outcomes. So I hope that these myths, the way that I've addressed them, helps you to address these myths when they come up in your work, and so that you can tell the haters and the other people who just don't get it what's really up. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.